FlatsClass YouTube, Captain CA here, and welcome back. We took a couple of days off over the weekend, had a little bit of fun, but it's back to work this week. And I want to share with you, to kick this week off, a couple of patterns that happen in the wintertime that 99% of you probably are not aware of. It's not obvious stuff, but once I reveal it, it will become obvious, and you will catch fish like this one right here. That's right. That was just from this past weekend when it was chilly. So if you're interested in that, follow me down to the shop. I think we're going to go down there, talk about it where it's a little bit warmer, because it's bright out today, but it's crispy. All right, most of us fish the same way year-round every year. We rarely adjust for what I'm going to say cold weather fishing. And don't make this mistake, because you're probably thinking I'm talking about downsizing the lures to like Ned style, or making a longer leader, or maybe even changing the tempo of the lure that you're working. Yes, all of those are important and definitely will make a difference in the results that you see at the end of the day in your catch ratio. But I'm talking about having a greater understanding on where the fish need to be because of their physiology. What's going to happen when that cold water puts them in a certain spot? Because you're still fishing the flats like you always do in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. You might know a few little spots where you think they might be, but I'm going to share a scenario with you where you're going to figure out every time. And once you master this equation, I'm telling you, you're going to notice that your catch ratio may even double, because you're going to be able to find these fish, and it's truly going to make it a lot easier to bundle up and get out there in that cold weather to go catch these fish, because it's going to concentrate them and make you a much better angler this winter. Now, I have a very primitive whiteboard drawing here that I'm going to share with you right now of this first scenario that's going to put you on the path to catching more fish. Now, here we go. All right, you can see in this, stop laughing. This is a creek, okay, right here. This little oval looking, deeper spot is 6 foot plus depth of water. You can see the compass here is north. The wind is coming from the northeast, actually. It's hard to depict that in a drawing like this because the way you're seeing me hold it, it looks like it's coming from the northwest, but it's coming from the northeast. You'll notice there's this little oxbow in the creek here, and I've got shallow, 1 to 2 foot. In the morning, okay? In the morning when you get out there, it's a good time to fish. So many of us think that, oh, well, we can start at like 10 or 11 o'clock and then go out there and start catching fish. Well, that's when the fish are kind of transitioning from where they're all bunched up to where they're going to go later on when the sun warms up certain areas. Now, for me here, when you have these ice blue skies, okay, and the water temperature is not static, it's not improving, it's cold. It's literally dropped from the last few days. Cold front comes through, day after the cold front, you're like, oh wow, what are we gonna do? Well, at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, there's plenty of light to be moving around. You go look for that deep spot, that 6 foot plus spot that might be in a creek, it might be in the intercoastal for you, or maybe it's in like these residential canals or little mangrove bays, but you're looking for that spot that is deep but has shallow water close by. What will happen is those fish, as that water temperature drops, it's going to force them into deeper insulating depths. They want to be as deep as they can, but they're not going to swim 2 miles to get to 20 feet of water. They're just going to slide off out of those little flats and stuff that they've been where you typically catch them spring, summer, and fall. They're going to fall into the next area that has some fairly deep water. Now, a lot of the time this season, we have higher tides in the morning and lower tides mid to late afternoons. So when the water's falling, it's going to take these fish into these deeper holes. But even though it's falling, when that sun gets high about noon, 1, 2 o'clock, and the water is getting lower and lower, it's warming up all those oyster edges and all that little bit of limestone and muddy bottom in these corners that are in the lee of the north or northeast wind. Also, because the sun is in the south sky this time of year, it warms up those shorelines more, so they see light for a longer period of time. So these fish that are holed up in this hole here that you're catching at 7:30, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, as the water pulls out, this water up here all of a sudden is starting to get pretty warm. And they'll slide up the edge and they'll find themselves in that little lee corner there, out of the wind. That's why I've got these little wind lines here, these little wind vane lines. And they'll get up out of the wind, especially if there's a mangrove shoreline or something there to protect them from the wind. And that water, now that it's shallower and the sun is out, will radiate and get warm quick. And they'll just go up there and park. Now, you've got to figure out how to get them to eat, whether you're fishing natural bait or if you're fishing smaller lures or those longer leaders or slowing it down, like I said in the first part of this conversation. That's up to you. But understanding where they're going to be. If you're out fishing a flat at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to score. You're not going to catch fish. You just aren't. You've got to be able to catch the fish where they are when they're going to be there. Larry Dalberg used to say, the fish are not where you wish them to be. They are where they're going to be. You've got to figure that out. They are where they are. So fishing those deeper zones, you've got to know where that is. Now, sure, I could have pulled out the iPad or a computer and showed you examples in creeks and things like that, where some spot like this might be, and give a zone away. But I'm not doing that. I want you to figure this out. You're going to figure this out. You probably have a favorite creek or intercoastal waterway or residential canal that you fish on a regular basis, and somewhere in there is a deeper groove. And if you start there, and then later in the day we're at the shallower edges that face the south, that are on the northeast corners, you're going to find out that you're catching more fish. Now here's another scenario. Let me clean this up with the eraser. I'm going to show you this next one. Okay, now the last scenario is when it's cold and it's got the ice blue skies, and they're not going to go very far from their little deep spot to move up. They want to transition. They're looking for a shallow spot close to the deep spot. When winter sets in and you start getting, and this is going to be a scenario I'm going to say where the tide is coming in on these winter days. So it's starting to come in, which is generally, if it's on my coast, when the incoming water comes, it actually drops the water temperature because the Gulf temperature is actually colder than the inside temperature most of the time. So you've got your deeper creek, and sometimes the fish never leave the deeper creek. All right, they just don't. They might stage in front of a little feeder, a little tributary creek like this, what I call a feeder creek, and they may just sit right down in here, and as the tide falls out, feed right in this zone, and then never really go up that creek when the water turns around and comes in. But if that incoming water is coming in and it's later in the day and it's getting good and full, and this stuff back in here, like this little shallow pond back here that's got like a rock edge in it, if that pond there has water in it. Like, you can look from your polling platform or your tower, or however you're doing, or maybe you're just getting out walking around. When you look into that pond and you can see wading birds back in there, there's probably going to be a little deep spot in there. And many times toward the end of the day in the afternoon, the fish that are in this deeper creek will swim up these little tiny veins and get into ponds like that to eat all the stuff that died when it was really shallow. Plus that dark colored mud and all the stuff rotting on the bottom. When the water comes in there, it warms up real fast. It's a lot easier to warm water that's less than 12 inches deep than it is to warm up water that's much deeper. So even though they're using this as insulating depth at night, they can come up here because this whole game is played off the temperature of the water. They want to be in survivable water, yet they still have to feed. And there's plenty of little morsels in here, little fiddler crabs and shrimp, shrimp that may have expired and died, or minnows that got stranded up there in some muddy holes. And now those redfish can come up there and just wreck them, where the trout would probably just stay right here in this deeper water. But if it's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you don't have that falling water anymore, and you just happen to be on that day where it's incoming water, you may be leaving that creek to go up some of these ponds and get in some of these little tiny, like I call them like bean ponds. They look like a little bean when you look at them on the chart. And doesn't matter where you are, if you live in any system that has marsh or something like that, it works. It really works. Now, if you live in a zone where you might be in a flat and these fish are coming out of, let's just say, a residential canal, but when they come outside the residential canal, there might be a big flat up there and you see a couple little funnels that run up on that flat. It's the same idea. It's just, does it have enough water for them to be up there? Is the sun out? Because if it's a cloudy day, none of this works. They stay in the deep water the whole time because it's not going to get warm up there. It's just not. They won't follow it up there. They'll just stay in the deeper water. But today, outside is a perfect example of an ice blue day. Front came through last night. This is the game that you want to play. So those two scenarios, if you understand them, because 99% of the anglers out there really don't. They're just fishing what they always fish. And some of them that are really struggling are fishing with those shorter leaders at a faster pace with their lures, and they're still using their favorite lures, which might be bigger jerk shads or 4 and 5 and 6 inch long plastics, where occasionally that works in certain areas. But I'm telling you, most of the time, it doesn't. If you follow some of these rules, you're going to catch more fish. You just got to understand the temperature game. Is the temperature game going to concentrate the fish? In what areas are they going to concentrate them? Because if you found them here when the water was in the morning and they're in a deeper hole somewhere in this creek, and then later on, maybe you found them on a shallow shelf, or maybe you followed one of these little tributary feeder creeks into a pond. That's what happens once the tide comes back in. So you have a play for the tide going out, you have a play for the tide coming in. That's what I have for you. Now, there's a few other things to consider, and I'm going to share that with you right now. Temperature and food are their only drivers in the wintertime. We're talking, it's January and soon to be early February next week. They're the only drivers for these fish that you're targeting. The brighter sun days do make it easier to figure out how these fish are going to move around. Not only can you see them in many instances, but you'll be able to see the tells, the dust-offs, the smokes. It's a lot easier on those brighter sun days, and it's more predictable because the fish are going to move a little bit if the sun is out, where if it's a cloudy, ice cold day with wind, they're probably just going to lock down and it's going to be tough. North and northeast shorelines that see the sun for the longest period of time obviously are going to be the warmer zones. So you need to focus on that. Lee shorelines, protected by wind for long periods of time. So you got to remember what the wind's been doing for the day before you got there. So it may have been blowing really hard to the northwest the day before in the morning and then started to shift to north, and then eventually overnight got to northeast, and now you're fishing on the northeast. That northeast corner is where they're all going to be switching to. They're going to be locking in to deeper points that face those shorelines so they can go up there. Naturally, those lee edges don't get turned over as much, so they're going to warm faster. And you're looking, and you've heard it a million times at a million seminars from trout and redfish guides and snook guides throughout your entire passion experience of catching fish inshore. You've got to pay attention to those darker, muddy, or rocky oyster line bottoms. They just stay warmer. Those zones honestly hold way more fish. They just do. They hold way more fish. And watch the water temperature. Now, I know not everyone's in a skiff with, Ray Marine electronics, and you push a button and the temperature sensor pops up and you can see, oh, I started this morning and it was 51, 52 degrees. And now 3 hours has gone by in the sun, and I've worked my way into one of those shorelines that sees the sun for the longest period of time. It's now getting a little shallower, and it's gone from 51, 52. Now it's all of a sudden 57. I realize not everyone has that. You might be in a kayak. You might be on a paddleboard for all I know. You might be wade fishing. But you can go and buy a cheap pool thermometer and just take it with you and just let it float in the water, and then just reel it back up and put it up inside your bibs or something like that, and then just test it every once in a while. You damn sure don't want to be fishing the water that's too cold. If you're always in the water that was cold in the morning and you're never finding that warmer water, you're not going to find these fish. They're not going to do that. They are masters at finding that warmer water. They have to. It's how they survive. And it's also where what little bait there is going to end up. So watch that water temp, and yes, lighter tackle, slower tempos, and downsizing the actual offering you're putting in front, presenting to these fish, are definitely going to make a gigantic difference in your success. But do not overlook fishing early in the morning when they're all going to be bunched up in those holes. There might be 30 or 40 trout in a hole mixed in with a few redfish at 7:30 in the morning. Even though it is cold, you can fish slow, or maybe you're fishing with natural bait. You can fish slow. You're gonna catch those fish. As the day gets older, they may move to seek out warmer water, because now all of a sudden, let's just say it was 51, 52. The shallow water was colder than that. Maybe it was 49. But as soon as that sun gets higher and higher and higher in the sky, warms up those north and northeast shorelines, and those fish slide up, well, then they're not there anymore. They're going to be moving. So you've got to get there early, take advantage, because once they start moving around, they'll start scattering out, and you won't have 30 or 40 fish anymore in one spot. They'll be all over the place, and it makes the odds a little tougher on you. I just want you to play the percentages. Hopefully this type of wintertime tactics or strategy really plays well for you if you're willing to do it. I'm sure many of you in the comments will put, man, some of my best days have been on the coldest days. And it's true. It's been like that for me too. People go, oh man, you must have been miserable out there. I was miserable, but we were catching them, made it a lot easier to do it. So, for me, this time of year is some of my favorite types of fishing that goes on. It just is, because of the cold days and then the warm up afterwards. It just makes fishing unbelievable. It really does. And we're going to talk about it more and more as we go through February, especially getting into spring. Okay, that's all I have for you today here in the studio. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it a ton. And if you do, give me a thumbs up, please. I want to be here for you every day. I'm here every day right now, but I want this channel to really grow. So help me out there. Subscribe, tell all your friends, share this information, and get out there, keep those rods bent, and keep those drags, screaming. It can happen. This is the month, January and February, when you can really have some spectacular fishing days. All right, go on, get out there, catch them.